Chapter 1: Difficult Childhood and Family Tragedy. You have to understand, from the very start, my life was steeped in tragedy, in loss. My father, Earl Little, was a man of principle, a man who didn't bow down to the system, to the white power that sought to keep black people down. He was a supporter of Marcus Garvey, one of the few who had the courage to stand up and speak truth to the powers that be. He wasn't afraid of them. But they were afraid of him. And I believe they killed him for it. They called it an accident, said he died in a streetcar accident. But I know better. I know my father was murdered by those who couldn't stand to see a black man rise up and challenge them. The Black Legion, the white supremacists who stalked our streets, they knew what his voice meant, and they knew what it meant to silence it. They silenced it in the most cowardly way, just as they always do. After my father's death, everything fell apart. My mother, Louise, she was left to fend for herself and for us, 6 children. A strong woman, but how strong can anyone be when the world is collapsing around them? She worked, she tried, but the weight of it all, the grief, the poverty, the hatred, tore her apart. She couldn't hold on. And eventually, she cracked. My mother suffered a mental breakdown, and they took her away. They institutionalized her. A mother, a woman broken by the system, by the world's cruelty, locked away like she didn't matter. And that's when we were torn apart. My siblings and I were sent into foster care. They split us up. And let me tell you, there's nothing more painful than being torn from the ones you love, from your family, when all you have left in this cold world is each other. I was just a boy, but I felt the pain like a knife in my heart. Every time I thought about my mother, every time I thought about my father's death, it felt like the world was just pressing in on me, trying to crush me, to break me into pieces. Foster care wasn't a refuge, it was another kind of prison. You're a child, you're scared, you're confused, and you have no idea where your family is, or if you'll ever see them again. You learn quick that the world doesn't care about your pain. The world doesn't care about black boys lost in the system. You learn that you're alone. That's how I grew up, alone, lost, angry. The world had already shown me how it would treat me, how it would treat my people. They took my father, they took my mother, they took my family. They wanted to break us. But what they didn't understand, what they couldn't understand, is that you can't break a people's spirit. You can try, but you can't break it. I was broken, yes, but I wasn't defeated. Not yet. The pain, the rage, the betrayal, it all fueled me. It made me who I became. A man who would never bow his head, who would never apologize for his existence, no matter how much they tried to destroy me. It made me a man who would fight back. And in the end, it made me a man who would stand up for the very thing they tried to destroy, my dignity, my family, my people. Chapter 2: Criminal Past and Imprisonment. I wasn't always the man you see today. In fact, I was a man lost, a man stumbling through life like a ghost. Back then, I was Malcolm Little, a name I hated, a name that was a constant reminder of the life I'd lived. The life I had to live. I wasn't born a criminal, but the streets, the system, the way the world treated me, what else was I supposed to do? It was survival, pure and simple. Boston, Harlem, those were the places where I learned how to hustle, how to take, how to fight for something when you have nothing. I dealt in drugs, ran with thieves, committed burglaries, anything to make a dollar, anything to prove I could survive in a world that had already written me off. I was lost in the world of crime, caught up in a web of things I never wanted to be part of, but there was no way out. Not for someone like me. Not when the world around you tells you that you're nothing but a criminal, nothing but a product of your environment. The system had already decided my fate before I even had a chance to make a choice. But then, in 1946, I was caught. They sentenced me to 8 to 10 years for larceny and breaking and entering. Prison, they thought, would be my punishment. But what they didn't know, what they could never understand, is that prison wasn't just a place of punishment, it was a place of transformation. It was in that cell, surrounded by nothing but my thoughts, that I started to reflect on everything I had done, everything I had been. I won't lie to you, it was shameful. I had fallen so low, and I saw it clearly for the first time in that cold, silent prison. I had been chasing after a life that wasn't mine, a life of illusion, of self-destruction. I realized that the things I had done, the people I had hurt, were all just pieces of a bigger lie. I was a man without purpose, without direction, and I could see it all crumbling before me. That's when the teachings of the Nation of Islam reached me. The words of Elijah Muhammad, the idea of self-respect, of black pride, they hit me like a lightning bolt. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had found something real, something that could give me back my humanity. The teachings gave me a new vision of myself. They gave me a way to see past the mistakes, past the darkness. I started reading, I started learning, about history, about myself, about what it means to be truly free. The prison walls, which had once confined me, now became the very thing that opened my eyes to a new world, to a new purpose. I can't pretend that it was easy. The old Malcolm, the one who had walked those streets, wanted to resurface. The temptation to go back to what I knew was always there. But something had changed inside me. The hate, the anger, the shame, it began to transform into something else. Something more powerful. I realized I could be more than the sum of my past, more than the criminal they tried to make me. I could rise. And I did. I emerged from that prison a different man, a man who knew his worth, a man who understood his purpose, a man who was ready to fight for his people. What I did before prison, the life I lived, is part of my story. But it's not the end of my story. It's not who I am anymore. And what I found in that prison, in that silence, is what made me Malcolm X, the man who would fight for his people, who would challenge the system, who would rise from the ashes of his past to become something greater. I became a man who could stand tall, not because of what I had done, but because of what I was about to do. Chapter 3, Tumultuous Marriage. Betty and I, we shared something real, something powerful. From the moment I met her, I knew she was different. She wasn't just some woman, she was strong, she was resilient, and she understood the weight of the world we were up against. She knew the struggle, and she was with me, right there by my side, through it all. She had my respect, and I had hers. That's the foundation of a good marriage, isn't it? Respect. But respect doesn't always mean understanding. And that's where things got complicated. You see, when you dedicate yourself to a cause, to a movement, especially one as dangerous and demanding as the one I was in, you can't always be there for your family. You can't always be present, no matter how much you want to be. The revolution, the struggle, it calls you, and it doesn't care about your personal life. It doesn't care about your wife, your children, your home. I was always gone. Always out there fighting, always on the road, always under threat, always speaking, organizing, moving from one place to the next. Betty, she understood that in the beginning. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, I could see the toll it was taking on her. She didn't just want a man who could lead a movement, she wanted a husband. She wanted a partner. And I couldn't give her that, not like she deserved. I was driven by the cause, by the need to right the wrongs of the world, to build something new. I was so caught up in the fire, in the mission, that I failed to see the strain it was putting on her, on us. She expressed it, her frustration, her pain, but I didn't always hear it, not the way I should have. I was too caught up in what I was doing to really understand what was happening to her, to our marriage. It wasn't just the physical absence. It was the emotional distance too. When you live a life like mine, when you're in the public eye, when you're constantly under pressure and danger, you start to put up walls. You start to shut parts of yourself off because you can't afford to show weakness, not to the world, not to anyone. And that wall, it didn't just keep out the world, it kept out the ones I loved. Betty, she needed me there, she needed my attention, my support. But I was too consumed by everything else. She couldn't always understand what I was going through, and I couldn't always share it with her. The strain was there, like a weight on our shoulders, pulling us further apart. I loved her. I really did. But sometimes love isn't enough when you're living a life like mine, a life filled with danger, with uncertainty, with a cause that never gives you a moment to breathe. There were moments, too many moments, when I wasn't there, when she was alone, when she was struggling, and I wasn't there to hold her hand, to listen, to comfort her. The tension grew, the distance grew. And I knew, deep down, that I was failing her. But I couldn't stop, not then. The world was burning, and I was trying to put out the fire, trying to light the way for others. But in the process, I burned the things I loved most. I still regret it. I still carry that weight, the weight of knowing I wasn't the husband I should have been, the father I should have been. I was a man consumed by his mission, by his fight, and I let the most important parts of my life slip away. It wasn't her fault, and it wasn't the revolution's fault. It was mine. I should have been better. I should have done better by her. Chapter 4, Breaking with the Nation of Islam. The day I left the Nation of Islam, when I made the decision to break from the very organization that had given me purpose, that had lifted me up from the darkness, it felt like the earth itself had shifted beneath my feet. I had believed in Elijah Muhammad. I had believed in the teachings, in the strength of our movement, in the promise of black liberation through the nation. It was the foundation that I built my life on. It was the belief that carried me through the hardest parts of my journey. But as I learned more, as I saw more, something started to eat at me. Something started to feel wrong. I was a man of principle, a man who preached integrity, honesty, and strength. But when I began to see the cracks in the foundation, when I began to understand the corruption, the moral failings, the lies within the nation, especially with Elijah Muhammad, I couldn't turn a blind eye anymore. I couldn't pretend I didn't see what was happening. It wasn't just the personal betrayal. It was the way I had been deceived. The man I had looked up to, the man I had believed in, had failed me. He had failed us all. I won't go into the details, but the revelations, the things I discovered about his actions, it shattered everything I had stood for, everything I had fought for. And that's when the conflict started. Leaving the nation wasn't a decision I took lightly. It wasn't a decision made out of anger or bitterness. It was a decision made out of the realization that I could no longer follow someone who had betrayed the very principles we stood for. But when I made that decision, it was like the walls of the world came crashing down on me. I lost everything. I lost my place in the nation. I lost my brothers and sisters, the people I had considered my family. The same people I had fought alongside, who had once looked at me as a leader, now turned on me. The threats came fast and furious. I was branded a traitor, an enemy. My name was dragged through the mud, and the very people I had fought to free, the people I had sacrificed for, now saw me as a threat. I had been part of something that had given me purpose, that had given me strength. And then, in an instant, it was all gone. I was no longer part of the movement. I was no longer part of the family. I was left out in the cold, exposed, vulnerable. The isolation, it cut deeper than anything I had ever felt before. I had been cast aside by the very people I had stood beside. But even as I was cast out, I couldn't turn back. I couldn't betray my own beliefs, my own integrity, for the sake of loyalty to a man who had failed me. The cost was high. The price was everything. And yet, I still believe I made the right choice. I had no illusions about the consequences. I knew that breaking from the nation meant I was walking a dangerous path. I knew the threats would come, and I knew they would be serious. But I also knew that I could never go back to the man I was before. I couldn't go back to a lie. And it was this break, this rupture in the fabric of my life, that ultimately led to my assassination. The forces I had fought against, the powers that feared what I represented, they saw me as a threat. I had seen too much. I had spoken too much. And I was no longer someone they could control. But even now, looking back on it, I don't regret it. It wasn't just about me. It was about the truth, about standing for what's right, even when the cost is your life. The world had shown me time and time again that betrayal is a part of the struggle, but so is resilience. You stand up, even when everything is against you. And that's what I did. That's what I will always do.